Least. But as promised, I want to now talk about what the United States has to do to overcome probably the biggest problem facing our nation, perhaps since its inception over 250 years ago. That is our unsustainable debt. Because of this virus and because of the almost irresponsible spending on both sides of the aisle, in Congress and the presidency, of course, we have contributed greatly to the national federal debt. There's only three ways that we can combat it. Higher taxes, but they don't necessarily have to be painful for the middle and lower classes. The first thing, of course, is to address what had been done under the Trump administration earlier, and that is to unwind those tax cuts that largely benefited the wealthiest citizens in our nation and corporations. Few Americans realize, but at one time, and not so long ago, in the 1960s, the highest rate on income taxes for the wealthiest individuals in our society was 90%. Now we have a billionaire class that indeed has even been complaining that they haven't been paying too much. It's time to remedy that. Have higher taxes, perhaps not 90%, but 50, 60% would do to rein in some of that capital. Corporate taxes the same way. At one time, corporate taxes were the largest contributors of revenue to the IRS, far surpassing what individuals gave. Now that chart has reversed. It started to take place in the 80s under the Reagan administration, and indeed, if you don't just count income tax, but indeed what you should count, which is payroll taxes, average Americans are paying much higher proportion of the revenues going into the IRS today than corporations are, and that has to be addressed as well. But that's just part one of our remedy. Part two has to do with probably the most important commodity that the United States has produced and exports: energy. What we should do is what Norway has been doing for decades and what even Russia finally understood has to be done. And Russia is a prime example of a country that in the early 90s was hundreds of billions of dollars in debt. For them, that was astronomical. Now, unlike us who have trillions in debt, they actually have trillions of dollars of surplus. That's right, the Russian Federation. And they did it all on one aspect of their tax regime, which was to tax exports of energy which were leaving their nation. We should do the same. Now, here is what Norway and Russia do, and other countries are starting to do it too. For domestically used consumption, in other words, for natural gas and petroleum products that are used domestically, the taxes stay low. Our consumers, our economy is able to take full advantage of the strategic assets that have been based under our soil. But for foreign oil companies, which by the way increasingly includes not just the United Kingdom and Netherlands and others, but China, yes, China and even Russia before, and even Venezuela to some degree, they would have to pay a much higher tax if any of that energy was exported beyond the shores of the United States for their consumption or for the global marketplace. This is what can produce a windfall of energy taxes for us and protect our strategic assets for use by our own citizens and economy. It would also, by the way, make it much more attractive to have a manufacturing plant here rather than to place it overseas where they could use cheap energy exported from the United States. Thirdly, and most importantly, finally, what we've seen in the financial markets over the last several decades has been the use of free money, which by the way is not free as far as U.S. taxpayers are concerned. That's another story for another time, but we will make the case that when the Federal Reserve gives money away, as it has to the banks, they use it for something like the carry trade, which immediately exports that capital overseas to purchase bonds and stocks and other entities. Of course, the derivatives and options market has been running wild in our country as well. The trading portfolios of our commercial banks have been more profitable for them than in any other form of lending to our economy or our mortgage industry. This has got to be remedied, and there's only one way to do so, because the wild stock market has been based totally on this free money that has been invested only in a handful of companies that are benefiting from this perverted economy that we now find ourselves in. The answer is a financial transaction tax. It eliminates the flash trading and all this manipulation that has been going on, which is of no benefit to our economy, but rather is just a means for traders to take full advantage of the free money that's being offered through our Federal Reserve and commercial banks, so that they could leverage this money as quickly as they can for trading activity, which again has nothing to do with benefiting small businesses, medium-sized businesses, or helping our economy here in the United States, or even lending to consumers so they could purchase homes, cars, or whatever else durable goods that they might need. So I maintain, and you'll see the figures and estimates from International Investor, that we can not only remedy our long-term federal debt, not only take care of Social Security and Medicare, which, by the way, themselves, if we just eliminate the cap on Social Security so that the high-income individuals have to pay into that, that would also be remedied even further. But if we take those prescriptions to heart, we can not only take care of our long-term debt, we can actually start to build surpluses again, which is what this nation needs, which is what we've enabled China, Russia, and other nations to do. And if we don't address it soon, before the return of inflation, which International Investor thinks is already here and moving quickly ahead, we're going to find that all those trillions of dollars of bonds that we owe to foreigners and others, including, again, Wall Street and offshore trading houses, will suddenly be much more painful for us to pay if we have to do it with dollars that are rapidly shrinking in terms of their purchasing power. So that is it for International Investor. We're going to devote another entire program to what's ahead for inflation the next time we talk, so I hope you stay tuned for that program as well. That's it for tonight. Keep your eyes open. We'll see you next time.